Hello all, happy whatever day it is. Welcome to this video lecture type thing. So, last time we talked about post-war America, and that was generally cultural America, how things culturally changed for America. Today we are going to look at the politics side of this post-war America. Harry S. Truman, a moderate Democratic senator from Missouri, replaced the more liberal Harry Wallace as FDR's vice president in the 1944 election. Thrust into the presidency after Roosevelt's death in April 1945, Truman matured into a decisive leader whose basic honesty and unpretentious style appealed to average Americans. Truman attempted to continue in the New Deal tradition of his presidency, of his predecessor, because you have to realize Harry S. Truman got thrusted into this presidency after FDR died. Economic programs and civil rights. Truman's proposal for full employment and for civil rights for African Americans ran into opposition from conservatives in Congress. Let's talk about Employment Act of 1946, inflation and strikes, and civil rights issues. So 3 things we are about to cover under these economic programs and civil rights section. So the Employment Act of 1946. In September 1945, during the same week that Japan formally surrendered, Truman urged Congress to enact a series of progressive measures, including national health insurance, an increase to the minimum wage, and a bill to commit the U.S. government to maintaining full employment. So 3 big concepts under this Employment Act of 1946. After much debate, the watered-down version of the Full Employment Bill was enacted as the Employment Act of 1946. It created the Council of Economic Advisors to counsel both the President and Congress on means of promoting national economic welfare. Over the next 7 years, a coalition between Republicans and conservative Southern Democrats, combined with the beginning of the World War, hindered passage of most of Truman's domestic programs. So Truman's whole goal was to continue this New Deal concept passed by his predecessor Franklin D. Roosevelt. But a Republican majority House and Senate, as well as the start of this Cold War, led to significant delays, if not flat-out refusals, of some of Truman's domestic issues. So, inflation and strikes. Truman urged Congress to continue the price controls of wartime in order to hold inflation in check. Instead, Southern Democrats joined with Republicans to relax the controls of the Office of Price Administration. The result was an inflation rate of almost 25% during the first year and a half of peace. Workers and unions wanted wages to catch up after years of wage controls. Over 4.5 million workers went on strike in 1946. Strikes by railroad and mine workers threatened the national safety. Truman took a tough approach to this challenge, seizing the mines and using soldiers to keep them operating until the United Mine Workers finally called off its strike. So, this is another issue that the Republicans and conservative Southerners took control and eased these inflation rates and was direct supporters of striking. So this led to a Republican-dominated time period, as many historians would put it. Alright. Civil rights. Truman was the first modern president to use the powers of his office to challenge racial discrimination. Bypassing Southern Democrats who controlled key committees in Congress, the president used his executive powers to establish the Committee on Civil Rights in 1946. He also strengthened the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, which aided the efforts of black leaders to end segregation in schools. Most importantly, in 1948, he ordered the end of racial discrimination throughout the federal government, including the armed forces. The end of segregation changed life on military bases, many of which were in the South. Recognizing the odds against passage of civil rights legislation, Truman nevertheless urged Congress to create a Fair Employment Practices Commission that would prevent employers from discriminating against the hiring of African Americans. Southern Democrats blocked this legislation. So, this was the first president that, since Reconstruction, took meaningful steps to end discrimination in the South and in other parts of the country. As you guys know, because you're in APUSH, so you already took middle school history and elementary school, Martin Luther King and all those people come around 20 years after this. So we are going to see a lot of changes, especially with discrimination and civil rights throughout these next couple of weeks of video lecturing. And when we do meet back in person, you'll see these changes. Republican control of the 18th Congress. This is what I'm talking about when I say Republicans were largely in control. Unhappy with inflation and strikes, voters were in a conservative mood in the fall of 1946 when they elected Republican majorities in both houses of Congress. So, Republicans, this was a midterm election, and Republicans were still largely in control of Congress. Under Republican control, the 18th Congress attempted to pass 2 tax cuts for upper-income Americans, but Truman vetoed both measures. More successful were Republican efforts to amend the Constitution and roll back some of the New Deal gains for labor. So 2 acts we are going to talk about. We are going to talk about the 22nd Amendment and the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947. So the 22nd Amendment. So, reacting against the election of Roosevelt as president 4 times, the Republican-dominated Congress proposed a constitutional amendment to limit a president to a maximum of 2 full terms in office. The 22nd Amendment was ratified by the states in 1951. So that was the 22nd Amendment. Let's talk about the Taft-Hartley Act. You do have an assignment posted on Google Classroom to summarize these key points in your own words. So please pay attention. So in 1947, Congress passed a pro-business Taft-Hartley Act. Truman vetoed the measure as a slave labor bill. But Congress overrode his veto. The one purpose of the Republican-sponsored law was to check the growing power of unions. Its provisions include, so 4 points. You are summarizing all 4 and telling me why he considered it a slave labor bill. Like I said, that assignment is on Google Classroom, so please look for it. So 4 key points. Outlawing the closed shop contract requiring workers to join a union before being hired. 2. Permitting states to pass right-to-work laws outlawing the union shop contract requiring workers to join the union after being hired. 3. Outlawing secondary boycotts, the practice of several unions supporting a striking union by joining a boycott of a company's products. 4. Giving the president the power to invoke a 80-day cooling off period before a strike endangering the national safety could be called. For years afterwards, unions sought unsuccessfully to repeal the Taft-Hartley Act. The act became a major issue dividing Republicans and Democrats in the 1950s. So in the next video, we are stopping here. And in the next video, we are going to talk about the election of 1948 and the fair deal. So please pay attention to Google Classroom and complete those assignments.